Hello and welcome to GBN America with me, Patrick Christys. And today I am joined by Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davies, who is somebody who's got an extensive military history, 21 years of active service. He's an inspirational speaker, an inspirational man, and it's time to talk America and Ukraine. Thank you very much for joining us, Lieutenant Colonel. Great to have you on the show. Now, what's the state of play when it comes to America continuing to fund Ukraine in this war?
You know, it's very much an open question right now if there's going to be any more funding. There may be some more. I predict that some kind of deal will be arranged at some point, but it's not going to be anywhere near as much as I think President Biden was looking for. And it's definitely not going to be an open-ended thing or match what happened in, up through the first 22 months of this war when it was over $100 billion. And that being the case, I think that it's the writing is on the wall. I think the reason why you're seeing a lot of slowdown and a less willingness to spend this money is because they see that the first $100 billion made no difference on the change of the war, and that there is no military path for Ukraine to win. And I think that you're probably seeing a move that people are saying we need to look at a negotiated settlement because it's unrealistic to think that just giving them more money is going to change the outcome.
I mean, is there not an argument to say that the amount of money and weapons and expertise that America provided has thus far prevented Russia from actually owning Ukraine?
Yeah, I think that's a valid complaint there, or argument that, in fact, had it not been for the massive amount of equipment that the United States has provided, the intelligence support, the millions of rounds of ammunition, thousands and thousands of rockets, training, all that. Without all that, I think that Ukraine would have lost in 2022, probably by the middle of the year, if not earlier. But that does not translate into defeating Russia, to driving them out, because there simply militarily isn't the capacity, whether in manpower, equipment, or in ammunition or support. It just doesn't exist on the Ukraine side. And concurrently, the Russian side continues to grow and get larger and more powerful. Their economy, all those things show conclusively there is no military path to victory for Ukraine.
There's some question marks about how grateful Zelensky has been to the West. I mean, our former defense minister here accused him of treating us like an Amazon shopping centre. I mean, do you think he's actually showing the right level of gratitude to American taxpayers?
Well, look, I got to be honest. I think there is some of that. I've actually made some comments about that myself, but I also put some of the blame on our side, quite frankly, because we have kind of led him to believe that we're going to give him whatever he needs and that we're going to be there for the long term. And led him to believe that we want you to keep fighting Russia. You know, our Secretary of Defense, Austin, said one of our objectives was to harm Russia. So we're facilitating that. But now then, it didn't work. It didn't drive Russia out, even though Zelensky was saying that ad nauseum for the entire, last 12 months especially. And now then, the reality is setting in for both sides. And there's some embarrassment, and there's also, some trying to figure out what's the way forward, both for the U.S. and for Zelensky. And there's frankly no easy path forward, but reality is going to impose itself whether they want it to or not.
I mean, Joe Biden doesn't necessarily have the best track record. We look at what happened in Afghanistan, where there was that quite disastrous pullout operation. You will know more about that than me. I mean, is there a concern that Joe Biden's version of diplomacy on the world stage here does lead to a disaster?
Well, it's unfortunately, it is kind of trending in that direction. I remember there was a really famous visit to the White House for the Afghan President Ashraf Ghani in June of 2021, where Biden said, yeah, we're going to continue to be there. We're going to provide long-term support. And 2 months later, their entire government and military collapsed and fell apart, and the Taliban won. Now, I was arguing in the years before that was the predictable result, that we would not win for very practical reasons. And the administration and the senior, Washington foreign policy elite all ignored that. And then the reality struck in August. The same dynamic, I fear, is happening here, is that we want to keep saying, no, we're going to defeat Putin. We're going to, drive him back. He can't win, and all this other bumper sticker stuff. But the realities on the ground don't facilitate that. And I think that the piper is going to be coming due pretty soon.
What would Trump do?
Well, Trump has been saying that he would have ended this in 24 hours. And I actually believe him in this case, because one of the things, for a lot of crazy things about Trump, but one of the consistent things from his time in running in 2016 all through his administration was that he did not want any more dumb wars, and he tried to end the ones that he had. And I think that he's serious. He does not want war in Europe. He does not want any risk of a major escalation, potentially nuclear conflict between the United States. And I think that he was telling the truth when he was on, I believe it was CBS a couple of days ago or a couple of weeks ago, where he said, look, I'm not wanting Ukraine to win. I'm not wanting Russia to win. I want to see the war come to an end. And I think that's what he would do if he comes into office.
What does a diplomatic agreement actually look like in practice? Because Ukraine doesn't want to concede any land to Russia. Russia obviously doesn't want to go into retreat. We here in Europe are concerned that if Putin keeps going into Ukraine, that he won't stop there. That's what we were all being told. That was the sell to British taxpayers, right? That was the sell to us there. Your money in the middle of a cost of living crisis has to go to fighting this war in Ukraine, because if we don't do that, then you're going to end up with bombs flying over that building that you can see behind me here. So is there any concern in the United States at all for whether or not Putin just cracks on through Europe?
Those same kind of statements and that same kind of scare tactics are on this side of the Atlantic too. So I just shake my head when I hear it, because it is utter nonsense. It's complete nonsense, because Russia doesn't have the capacity to do that. And you don't need to be a military expert to see it. After almost 2 years of war, Russia, the most they've gotten is a little strip of about 17% of the one country on their border, with no military alliance, with no navy, with a very limited air force, and they still can't go farther, even into the Donbass, than they have. The idea that somehow if the Ukraine army collapses, for example, and Russia does move up like to the Dnieper River, which is a legitimate possibility, that they could then go forward into a 32-member alliance that has excellent air forces, a large navy, large trained forces, and mechanized, and all that is complete and utter nonsense. Putin has no interest in doing that. He has no capacity to do that, even if he wanted to. So that fear is completely unfounded.
Okay, so what would a diplomatic deal look like between Ukraine and Russia now? Presumably you'd say to Zelensky, look, that's it, mate. We're not giving you any more, so you're going to have to try and find a peace deal with Putin. I mean, what do you think in practical terms that looks like?
Yeah, it's a bit convoluted now than it could have been. As I have on my Daniel Davies deep dive show on YouTube just yesterday, we had a long segment on this issue. And in March and April of 2022, the broad outlines of a deal to end the war 1 month in were on the table in Istanbul. And both sides agreed that Ukraine would be neutral. It would not join NATO, but that it would have the ability to have relations bilateral with anybody in Europe that it wanted to, and it would remain free. Unfortunately, that was scuttled and it was ended. And now then, Ukraine then won a couple of tactical victories. And now then they're saying, all right, they don't want to do any more negotiating in 2022. They want to win. But now then we're to the point to where that is not going to happen. Now Putin is saying, I'm not so interested in talking again. Now he's not offering that deal that they offered in 2022, which I argued would be the case if you reject it. The longer you wait, the worse the terms are going to get. Right now, the best that Ukraine can hope for is to lose those 4 regions, those 4 oblasts that they have in the east, and certainly Ukraine's never coming back into the conversation. But the longer that they wait, the higher the risk that Russia eventually gets even more territory, maybe up to the Dnieper River, perhaps as many as 4 additional ones. That's probably the best they can hope for right now. But I just reinforce, the longer they wait, the less they're going to get in the deal, I think.
Yeah, indeed. And America is helping to prop up, I suppose, another war at the moment, Israel-Hamas. What's the state of play with that then in the US?
Yeah, that's where the priority of effort is, because right now people can say, okay, our support to Israel can make a military difference. If we keep giving them artillery shells, air defense rockets, intelligence, all that kind of thing, more money, that can maybe make a difference. That can actually help Israel win. You can't make that argument in Ukraine anymore. And that's becoming evident across the board in the U.S., even in the mainstream media. The tide has definitely turned there. And so I think that because of that, you're going to see people less and less likely to help Ukraine. And you've also got the China-Taiwan issue where people want to put more money in Taiwan as a preventive measure so that what happened in Ukraine doesn't happen against Taiwan. So all of those things are mitigating against any more effort being put into Ukraine.